proceed. For the record, Mr. Davidson allowed the state to reopen their direct.
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead.
Nick, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits 304, 305, and 306. Can you take a look at those and see if you recognize what's depicted there?
I recognize them.
What do those photos show?
It shows the front side of a gunshot wound to my right arm. This one looks like the entry wound on my left hip, and this is the exit wound on my left lower back.
Move to admit 304, 306, I believe.
304, 305, and 306, I think
Yes.
is what I had.
No objection.
304, 305, and 306 are admitted.
And Judge, since we had to switch computers, I'm not going to be able to project it. Can I publish the old-fashioned way?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me see counsel up here for a second, please.
Thank you, Judge. That's all I have.
Cross-exam, Mr. Davidson.
Good morning, Mr. Piring.
Good morning.
It sounds like you and Mr. Brew were very close friends.
We were.
Lived together for several years, attorney brothers,
That is correct.
as you are with Kyle Zintek,
Correct.
and Mr. Nicholas Prado, correct?
Prado, correct.
Prado, apologize. All four of you dealt with Kyle.
Correct.
If I understood your testimony correctly, Mr. Piring, you were first alerted to the situation by hearing your roommate's voice, correct?
That is correct.
He was yelling, wasn't he?
That is correct.
Where were you when you heard your roommate yelling?
In that courtyard area in between the two buildings.
And you can't see the courtyard, from the courtyard you can't see the parking lot, can you?
No, you cannot.
There's a building in the way, right?
Correct.
So you're able to hear Colin's voice on the other side of the building, correct?
Correct.
Across Franklin, correct?
At the time, I didn't know where he was, but by the time I got over there, he was across the street.
Okay, so he was on the other side of Franklin, correct?
At the time, like I said, I couldn't see him, so when I got over there, he was across Franklin.
Okay, and when you got across Franklin and you saw him in the parking lot, it was the far end of the parking lot, correct?
He was on that pathway, not the parking lot.
The far end, though, correct?
What do you mean the far end?
The far end of the pathway where the parking lot ends.
Where the parking lot ends, yes.
Okay, so you heard him from quite a distance. You said you were jogging, correct?
Correct.
And if I understood your testimony correctly, the reason that you jumped over the bush and you ran to Colin was because you saw him fall.
That is correct.
And that prior to him falling, it was just Colin by himself and these three other individuals, right?
That is correct.
And that there was no one with Colin, right?
That is correct.
It was Colin and then these three other guys.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And these three other guys, in response to Colin saying, you have to get out, F you have to leave, these three other guys said something along the line of, you can't kick me out.
From what I heard.
They were standing their ground.
Correct.
They were arguing back saying, we're not going anywhere.
Correct.
You also testified that you didn't hear any gunshots when Colin fell, correct?
That is correct.
Now, when you were transported to the hospital, the police talked to you, didn't they?
Not in the ambulance, but in the hospital, correct?
May I correctly assume that you've had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Barker and/or other members of the prosecution team prior to your testimony today?
I have.
And you've had a chance to review the transcripts?
I have.
You've had a chance to review your transcripts from that interview?
Oh, correct.
Okay. I'm not trying to be rude with you, it's just difficult for a court reporter to write down more than one person talking at a time.
My apologies.
You told the police a pretty different story that night, didn't you?
What did I tell them?
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Exhibit, counsel.
This is number 66.
Thank you.
How many times did you meet with the prosecution incidentally before testifying today?
I believe 3 or 4 times.
And we've never met before today, have we?
No, we haven't.
When you were interviewed by the police at the hospital, it was done in 2 parts, wasn't it?
Correct.
And Exhibit 66 has both parts of that interview, doesn't it?
Looks like it, yes.
So let's start at the beginning. Page 2. See that?
See,
Page 2?
yes.
Okay. Direct your attention to line 8. Question. I'm listening. Answer. This is you speaking, correct?
Correct.
Okay. He was talking to one kid. He was talking to one kid. Some other kid was like, back away, said, we don't want any problems. Right?
That's what it says.
Okay. When you're referring to he was talking to one kid, you're talking about Colin, aren't you?
Correct.
And when you're saying some other kid was like, back away, said, we don't want any problems, you're talking about the kid that comes from the parking lot.
I believe so.
You go on to say this kid comes from the parking lot, the east side of Mountain View, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Then you go on to say, east side of Mountain View, comes through the parking lot, shines a flashlight, and says, back up. That's what you told the police, right?
Correct.
You go on to say, we're like, and naturally, everyone else is still like progressing because we wanted to like make them leave. Right?
Correct.
Who's we?
Well, at that point, it was just me and Colin.
Okay, so you and Colin are naturally still progressing after this individual approaches from the parking lot with a flashlight and says, back up. You said.
Well, that's what I said.
Okay. And then there's some pages that essentially cover interaction between you and the medical staff. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
The questioning then resumes later on page 11, correct?
Correct.
And you're asked where you saw this guy coming from, and you said the west side of Mountain View, right?
Correct.
You're referring to Mountain View parking lot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you spoke to the police, you didn't tell them that you ran up because Colin had fallen. You told them that you ran up because you were trying to calm people down, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you told the police that you were, use your words, mainly trying to calm Colin down. Isn't that what you said?
That is correct, because I didn't know who else was there.
That's what you said to the police the night this happened, isn't it?
That is correct, because I didn't know who the other people were.
So you're running up because there's an altercation and you're trying to calm people down. That's what you told the police. And you explained to the detective that there's a 2-foot gap between the roadway and the parking lot, right?
Correct.
And we can agree that the roadway is at a higher elevation than the parking lot down below.
Correct.
Tell the police, not that Colin was shot and then, or fell and you ran over, but rather you tell the police, and I'll refer you to line 17. And so I was trying to calm people down, and I went over there and I was like, hey, calm down, calm down. He said, step back. Now when you say he said step back, you're referring to the person who had the flashlight, correct?
Correct.
He said step back, and at the exact moment he said step back, I jumped from the top to the lower part, and that's when I got shot. I got shot like in midair. Those were the words that you gave to the police the night this all happened, aren't they?
Correct.
Let's turn the page to page 12, please, sir. Line 4, as we covered before, you stated to the detective you were trying to calm it down, mainly trying to calm your roommate down, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You noted that he was deceased, your roommate, correct?
Yes.
And that there were about 4 other people on the opposite side of us, correct?
Correct.
Now, let's back up to your testimony when Mr. Parker was asking you questions. You said these 4 people were like, we're not leaving, you can't kick us out, right?
Originally, it was 3 people. Stephen Jones would make the 4th.
Okay. 3 or 4 people, they were backing up, according to your testimony before, right?
Correct.
We're not leaving, you can't kick us out, correct?
Correct.
You even used the phrase chest bumping in your direct testimony, didn't you?
I did.
That's not what you told the police, though, is it?
Well, there was...
Chest pumping was the way he phrased it, not bumping.
Well, let's just look at what you told the police. I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Okay.
Line 7. So let's put this back into context. Backing back up to line 5. And there were 4 people on the opposite side of us. That's what you said, correct?
Correct.
The next thing you state is 3 of which were like, okay, we're like, we're leaving. That's what you told the police, correct?
Correct.
We're leaving is not the same as you can't tell us to go, is it?
I believe not. There were multiple words exchanged.
So you're referring to these 3 guys essentially saying that they're going to leave, and then you go on to talk about how this other guy, who we later determine is Stephen, comes from the parking lot with a flashlight, correct?
Correct.
And he says, or is like, step back as you're jumping.
Correct.
You told the police that Colin was kind of like headed towards his way, kind of, I think, maybe towards someone else, and he put the flashlight up, and as soon as he did, started shooting, correct?
Correct.
That's what you told the police when you were interviewed just
In the hospital?
shortly after this incident occurred on October 8th, 2015, correct?
When I was in the hospital, correct.
Okay. So on October 8th, you recalled hearing gunshots, correct?
I do.
October 8th, you clearly told the police that it was not until after you heard Stephen giving commands back up and lifting up his flashlight that you heard shots, correct?
Correct.
And it's not, according to what you told the police originally, it wasn't until after you heard shots that you saw Colin fall, correct?
Well, I didn't hear the first shots that hit Colin, like I said before.
Well, I know you said that before today. I'm talking about what you told the police originally. What you told the police originally is that you heard shots and then you saw Colin fall, didn't you?
I believe so. I was in shock.
Let's go ahead and skip to the second part of your hospital interview with the police.
And which page is that?
I would assume, because the first one is 16 pages, that would be the 17th page. It should, page numbering should start back over at 1. Please let me know if yours is different.
Is that one?
Okay. So, again, just to remind the jury, you're perfectly clear, both in direct examination and cross-examination, that it was just Colin and these 3 other guys, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, you told the police something different about that as well, didn't you?
And what was that?
Well, let's look at page 2. Talking about Colin on line 2. And he was like basically kind of cussing, like, get the fuck out of here. And I remember specifically 3 of them, they're like, okay, we'll leave. And then a couple other people came up and were like saying the same thing. Like, you guys got to go. You're not welcome. Blah, blah, blah. All this and that. That was what you told the police, isn't it?
Correct, but I don't know exactly who that was.
Well, these weren't people that were with the 3 guys who were saying, okay, we'll leave. You're saying these are other people that came up and started joining Colin.
I didn't say they joined Colin.
Okay, well, let's go back through it again. You can tell me who you're referring to.
I don't know who I was referring to.
And I remember specifically 3 of them, they're like, okay, we'll leave. And then a couple other people came up and were like saying the same thing, like, you guys got to go, you're not welcome, blah, 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 all this and that. So there were other people there, according to what you told the police originally anyways, also telling these people to leave.
I believe so.
And you again confirmed with the police, when you talked to them the night of the incident, that these 3 individuals were not chest puffing or chest bumping. They said like, okay, we'll leave. That's what you told the police, isn't it, Mr. Moore?
Prior to that, they were yelling at each other.
Okay. Wasn't my question. That's what you told the police, even this happens, what I just read, isn't it?
Yes.
And you go on to explain, this dude with the gun, he turned right to that kid, looks over at this kid, and starts walking toward him. He's not even charging or anything. The kid says, like, stop or whatever. When you say, he says stop or whatever, you're referring to the person with the flashlight, Mr. Jones, right?
Correct. And then I go and state that he doesn't have a gun.
Okay. Like I said, he doesn't announce that he has a gun, correct?
Correct.
Right. And you are probably 10 feet behind Colin at that point, correct?
Correct.
And he puts Mr. Jones puts the light up, correct?
Correct. I see the flashlight.
And after he puts the light up, and then, in your words, he just popped like 8 rounds, correct?
Correct.
So you, at least two occasions, tell the police the night of the incident that you did hear gunshots, didn't you?
I did hear gunshots, yes.
You told the police that Colin was looking straight at Mr. Jones when this happened.
He turned towards him?
You told the police Colin was looking straight at him when this happened, didn't you?
Correct.
Now, when you originally, let me back up. As of the time you're at the hospital and you're talking to the detective, you at that moment had no idea who the individual holding the flashlight or the gun was, did you?
I did not.
You didn't know if he was at the party that night, did you?
I did not know.
Okay. You don't know where he was prior to coming from the west side of the parking lot?
I did not.
Now, at some point, a couple days after you were released from the hospital, you were interviewed again, weren't you?
Correct.
And I believe Mr. Barker was at that interview, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Shea?
Correct.
And Sergeant O'Hagan, right?
Correct.
And that interview was also recorded, correct?
Correct.
Approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Exhibit 67. Is that a transcript of your interview with Mr. Barker, Mr. Shea, and Detective O'Hagan?
Yes.
Okay, direct your attention to page 4. And actually, before I ask you about that, between the time you were discharged, let me back up. Between the time that you spoke to the police at the hospital and the time that you spoke to the 3 gentlemen behind me, you obviously spoke to other friends of yours or people who were there about what happened, didn't you?
I mean, I spoke to friends about not necessarily what happened, but I'm glad that they came and visited me.
Okay. Well, let's look at page 4 then. Line 17. You tell these 3 gentlemen, and I never got to see this kid's face at all, but by the time, I had even seen Colin fall, this kid had already apparently gone, grabbed the gun, and came back, turned this light on, shined it at Colin. That's what you told these 3 gentlemen a few days later, correct?
Correct.
It would be impossible for you to have known that if you didn't know where this individual came from when he emerged from the parking lot, unless somebody else told you. True?
I saw that he came from the parking lot with a light.
Did you see him grab the gun?
No, I said I apparently. So he grabbed a gun and came back.
He apparently had gone, grabbed a gun, and came back. Came back means he was there initially and then returned, doesn't it?
If you put it in that way, I guess, yeah.
Well, those are the words that you used, aren't they?
But I don't know if he was there originally.
Well, that's my point, is that you couldn't have known that because you didn't know where he came from when he first came out with the flashlight, did you?
Correct.
So you obviously spoke to other people about this case before you spoke to the prosecution, didn't you?
I don't recall when I was in the hospital who I spoke to.
Now, it almost sounded like Mr. Barker's trying to make the case that Mr. Brew didn't fall because he was shot, but because he tripped over this curb. You never said anything to the police in any of your interviews about Colin tripping, did you?
No, I said he fell.
I'm not asking about falling. You never said anything about tripping, did you?
I don't believe so.
You never said anything about the curb being an obstruction to him, did you?
I wasn't looking at the curb, no.
I'm not asking if you were looking at the curb, sir. I'm asking if you ever said anything to the police about the curb being an issue with him falling.
I don't believe so.
Just how much did you have to drink that night?
I wasn't counting. A couple of drinks.
Do you have any reason to disbelieve a toxicology report indicating that you were 2.5 times the legal limit?
No.
Was Mr. Zintek drinking that evening?
I believe so.
Was he smoking marijuana?
Not that I know of.
Was Mr. is it Prado?
Prado?
Mr. Prado drinking that evening?
I believe so.
How much was he drinking?
I didn't count his drinks either.
Was he smoking marijuana?
No.
Was Mr. Brew drinking that evening?
Yes.
Do you have a sense of how much he had to drink?
I wasn't counting his drinks either.
Was he smoking marijuana that evening?
No.
Well, you're nodding your head and you're saying no. Is it?
Oh, sorry, no.
Okay. Did he use any other drugs that evening?
No.
Have a brief moment. Sure. Thank you, sir. No further questions.
Redirect.
Thank you. Nick, let's bring this back to reality, shall we?
Okay.
Your Honor, move to strike.
It is stricken. Can I see counsel up here, please?
Nick, when you were shot twice by the defendant, where did you go after that?
To the hospital
Okay, and for what purpose?
for medical care.
And were you in shock at the time?
Yes, a lot.
Were you in pain?
A lot.
Were
Yes.
people treating you at the time?
Yes.
In fact, counsel talked about how while you were talking to the police, there were people there helping you. Is that right?
Correct.
And they were interrupting this conversation at times. Is that true?
Correct, and you can see it in the transcripts as well.
And I think counsel referred to that as well, didn't he?
I believe so.
So this very first conversation about what happened occurred at the hospital. Is that right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The very first conversation you had about this case occurred at the hospital. Is that right?
Correct.
And counsel talked about things that may be different than what you testified to today. Let's talk about the things that were consistent, all right?
Okay.
Were you consistent that there was no physical altercation at any point?
Correct.
Were you consistent that nobody else had a weapon aside from the defendant?
Correct.
That nobody else said, I have a gun?
Correct.
That Colin did not rush anybody?
Correct.
That Colin had nothing in his hands?
Correct.
That he said nothing aggressive to the shooter?
Correct.
That nobody was ever surrounded by any group, is that correct?
That is correct.
Those are all consistent with what you testified to and what you said back to the police, is that right?
That's correct.
Did counsel refer in the transcript where it is he reports there's a prior consistent statement of what he just said?
Granted.
Well, let's go through the whole statement then.
Okay.
Do you have that exhibit?
66 or 67?
Your Honor, asked and answered, it was just as to the last comment, counsel asserted that there was a prior consistent statement in the transcript that this witness said in his prior out-of-court statement that there was no one surrounding the group. I'd like counsel to identify where in the transcript that prior consistent
Well,
statement.
let me rephrase, Judge.
Okay.
Is there anywhere in the transcript where you say that someone was surrounded by anyone?
No.
Okay. And today, did you say that there was anybody surrounding anybody?
No.
Let's go through the transcript, what counsel was talking about as far as things that were different. On page 2, this is the first exhibit, I believe it's 66. Counsel referred to this section where he said, where the police officer said, I'm listening, and you talk about, he was talking to one kid, and he was talking to one kid, and some other kid was like, back away, and we don't want any problems. Is that different than what you testified to before?
No, I don't believe so.
And then this kid comes from the parking lot. Who was that kid?
The shooter at the time?
Is that different than what you said before?
No.
Comes through the parking lot.
I think counsel misread that quotation. I'd like to have it reread.
I'll read the whole thing again.
I just want lines 9 through 11 read, Your Honor.
9 through
I'd be
11,
happy
please.
to. He was talking to one kid, and he was talking to one kid, and some other kid was like, back away, said, we don't want any problems. This kid comes from the parking lot, the east side of Mountain View. Anything different there that I'm missing?
I think when I said this kid comes from the parking lot, I think the defense is getting it confused with the kid that Colin was talking to.
All right, thank you for that clarification. So there are multiple kids you're referring to in this paragraph.
Correct.
And then further, counsel had you read lines 13 through 15, east side of Mountain View, which would be the parking lot? Or,
Correct.
Okay. Comes through the parking lot, shines a flashlight, and says back up. Now, earlier you said you heard stop. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a big difference in your mind about whether it was stop or back up?
No, there's not.
Did he say anything about a gun?
No, he did not.
We're like, and continuing on, we're like, and naturally everyone else is still like progressing because we wanted to like make them leave. What are you referring to when you say we're like, and naturally everyone else is like still progressing?
So at that point, Colin and the other kids were still in an argument, and they said they were going to leave. They weren't leaving. They were, like I said before, kind of standing their ground. And so at that point, I was getting closer to Colin, progressing, and
Okay.
then when I saw him turn is when I jumped, and he fell, and I jumped over the bushes.
Thank you. Let's go to page 11. Counsel had you read lines 9 through 10. You said, I don't know, so I ran up because I knew there was an altercation. I was trying to calm people down. Who were you trying to calm down?
Colin and the kids who were yelling at him?
Because people would imply multiple persons, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so not just Colin, but the other people.
Correct.
But Colin was one of them, as you testified to, right?
Correct.
And then skipping down to 17 through 20, counsel referred to, and so I was like, I was trying to calm people down, and I went over there, and I was like, hey, calm down, calm down. He said, step back. Who are you referring to at that point?
I believe the shooter?
So step back. Anything about a gun there?
No.
And I, at that exact moment, he said, step back, I jumped from the top to the lower part, and that's when I got shot. I got shot like in midair. Is that consistent with what you testified to earlier?
That is correct.
Page 12. Lines 4 through 5. Trying to calm it down, mainly trying to calm my roommate down. Who are you referring to?
Colin?
Who's dead, you said. And there was about 4 people on the opposite side of us. Who were the 4 people?
I don't know who they were.
So you weren't able to identify who those people were at the time?
No. Like I said, I was focused mainly on Colin.
Was one of the people that you were referring to the shooter?
As he came from the parking lot?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's go to the next exhibit, Exhibit 67. So, Nick, just let's put this in perspective a little bit. When you were meeting with myself, Sergeant O'Hagan, Brian Shea, we'll put this in a timeline. When were you released from the hospital?
Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon.
And do you recall when you had the conversation with us?
I believe it was Monday, Tuesday.
Were you still bandaged up?
I was.
Did you have a hard time walking at that point?
I did.
And you met with us, and you met with also another individual who works for Victim Witness, is that correct?
Correct.
Because you're a victim in the case?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
May we approach the
Stricken. No. Please continue.
So counsel had you refer to page 2 of that transcript. Do you have that there?
Yes.
And he said, and he had you refer to a pretty lengthy paragraph that he summarized, but let's read the whole thing.
Objection, Your Honor, this states I had to refer to page 4.
Sustained.
I don't recall that, Judge, but I'll go to page 4 as well. If counsel could refer me to what lines he thinks he...
4 lines 17 through 19.
Okay, let's read the whole thing under Rule 106, Judge, for completeness. Your answer...
I'm sorry?
We approach on the request for the 106 reading.
Sure.
My person witness give the exhibit.
Phrase. I was on the wrong exhibit. Exhibit 66. It renumbers. So go to the second section on page 2. Counsel asked you about, you said you heard, or he just popped like 8 rounds. And counsel asked you if that was different than what you testified before, because you indicated you didn't hear any gunshots. Is that correct?
The initial gunshots I didn't hear.
Okay.
Correct.
Looking back, do you realize that there were gunshots?
Oh, yes.
I mean, were you shot?
Yes.
Did you see that Colin was shot?
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear it at the time that the gunshots were going off?
Not the ones that shot Colin or myself, and then I heard the rest.
Heard the ones afterwards?
Yeah.
After that pause?
Correct.
All right, now let's go to 67.
I don't have the exhibit.
I think
Counsel?
it's on the table, I'm sorry.
Approach, Judge?
Yes.
Thank you.
There you go.
Which page?
Page 4. Counsel asked you about this phrase right in the middle of your answer. There's about a paragraph answer, and you said, and I never got to see the kid's face at all, but by the time, I had even seen Colin fall, this kid had already apparently gone, grabbed the gun and come back, turned this light on, shined it at Colin. Let me ask you about that. You used the word apparently. Why did you use that word there?
Because I was assuming that he grabbed the gun, turned the light on, shined it at us
Why?
to shoot us.
Right, but where did he come from?
Like his car?
Okay, because you were not, did you see him pass you as you were running up the sidewalk?
No, I did not.
Did you see him coming from the other side of the, I guess it would be the south of Mountain View?
No, I did not.
Where did you see him coming from?
The parking lot?
What are in parking lots?
Cars.
Thank you. Have a moment, Judge?
Sure.
Let me go back to the first thing that counsel asked you about. When you heard Colin's voice, do you know exactly where he was at that point?
No, I did
Why?
not. because of the building obstructing my view.
Okay, and by the time you got around that building, where was he?
He was across the street at that point on the driveway.
So you don't know where he was when you heard him initially?
I do not.
And then you saw him walk up the sidewalk area
Correct.
adjacent to the parking lot?
Correct.
Council talked about the legal limit. Do you know what the legal limit for alcohol is?
For an underager, it'd be 0.
0. What is it for driving?
I believe it's .08 in the state of Arizona.
Were you driving?
No, I was not.
But you had a few drinks that night.
Yes, I did.
Even still, do you have a good recollection of what happened to you?
I do.
Thank you. Nothing further.
And I'll turn to members of our jury and see if they have any questions for this witness. It does not appear that we do. Can this witness be excused?
Judge?
I'll take that in just a second.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You are excused. All right, folks, let's go ahead and break a little bit early for lunch. Please remember the admonition. Be back in your jury room at 1:25. We'll start at 1:30.